Welcome to the webinar Energy Efficiency Toolkit for Buildings, the guide to making the business case for saving energies in a building portfolio, hosted by Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency in collaboration with World Resources Institute and various partners. The webinar is organized under the umbrella of Building Efficiency Accelerator. We are pleased that 125 people registered for this webinar, so welcome to everybody. My name is Aristidis Tsakiris, and I'm a research assistant at Copenhagen Centre on Energy Efficiency. The Centre conducts research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and serves as Energy Efficiency Hub for Sustainable Energy for All initiative. The Centre has an established network of global, regional, and national partners with a broad range of stakeholders to help accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency activities. We also support Building Efficiency Accelerator with hosting different webinars from various partners. Now, I would like to quickly introduce to everybody the panelists. Roland is the Director for Sustainable Buildings and Cities at the World Business Council Sustainable Development. Delphine is the Manager of the Energy Efficiency in Buildings at the World Business Council Sustainable Development, and Eddie is the Global Sustainability Project Manager at SGS. On a regular basis, the Building Efficiency Accelerator is conducting webinars, and all materials, including recordings and presentations from previous webinars, can be found on Copenhagen Centre's Knowledge Management System. In the e-learning session, we have a shortcut for Building Efficiency Accelerator webinar collection. The materials of today's webinars will be uploaded there shortly. Finally, I would like to inform everybody that you can send us your questions, which will be answered at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. Please do not forget to mention for whom the question is. And now I would like to give the floor to Roland.
Thank you very much, Aristidis. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Roland Hunziker. I'm Director for Sustainable Buildings and Cities at the WBCSD, and I'm happy to give a very short introduction on this webinar today. We'll go straight into the presentation of the toolkit. My colleague Delphine will run you through that in terms of how it is built, vision planning, implementation, evaluating, and results and feedback. Those are the key steps as part of our EEB toolkit. We'll briefly talk about the use of this toolkit in a city context, which is obviously important for the BEA project, and then we'll take some Q&A in the last about 15 minutes of the webinar. The Building Efficiency Accelerator partnership has been set up under the UN Sustainable Energy for All. A total of different accelerators operate under this. And the overall goal is to ensure universal access to modern energy services, to double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency, and to double the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix. So those are the three overarching goals of SE for All, and buildings is one of the key accelerators on the energy efficiency topic. You can see here the organizations that are cooperating under the BEA. So it's a large multi-stakeholder approach to working in local markets with cities on solving the energy efficiency challenge. What do cities sign up to do in the BEA? As I said, the overall goal is to double the rate of energy efficiency, but when we break that down to the city level, it's to implement one policy, to implement a demonstration project, and also to create a baseline and report annual progress. So for any city that wants to join the BEA, those would be the 3 different strands. And obviously all the partners that are operating on the BEA are there to support cities in their different undertakings. Today's webinar is hosted by World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We are a global association of 200 multinational companies. You see their logos displayed here. And we are a cross-sectoral organization. We represent about 24 sectors all around the world. And you can see quite a large footprint of this organization and its members. Many of our members are in the building sector, and that's why we have developed over the past few years a special approach around energy efficiency in buildings. Why is that? Obviously, we all know the headline figures. Buildings represent about 1/3 of global end-use energy and 20% of all greenhouse gas emitted. So it's a major imperative for us to get building energy use under control. But it is also a large business opportunity, which is obviously what companies are interested in. There is an untapped market out there for energy efficiency solutions. And what we need to do is work with the stakeholders along the whole value chain to unlock those opportunities. We've been working over the last number of years with our members in the Energy Efficiency in Buildings project under the leadership of Lafarge-Holcim and United Technologies. And the approach has been to work in local markets and to engage the stakeholders on the market barriers and to drive action plans that overcome the locally relevant market barriers. And it's been a private sector-led program where we bring different partners in the value chain together with the city to analyze and develop action plans. So how does this EEB2 approach look like? You see here the fragmented value chain with all the different players that need to be engaged, and action plans typically focus around the areas of awareness, workforce capacity, finance, and policy. We've done pilot projects in several markets around the world, and we have energy efficiency platforms now up and running in Houston, in Warsaw, Poland, in Jakarta, in Shanghai, as well as in Jaipur, India. And this is obviously work we are also sharing through the BEA and how we can engage the private sector in these local engagements. Today's focus is on one area of work that we have developed through the EEB project, and that's how do corporates and how do individual organizations take action. When we started EEB2, we looked at different case studies of member companies in WBCSD that back in 2010 had signed the EEB manifesto. This was a simple pledge that a company would monitor, measure, and report its energy use in buildings, take targets for reduction, and engage stakeholders around that. And we issued 2 years back about 26 case studies that looked at what corporates are doing. In particular, we did a visit to Infosys in India, which is one of the companies that drives the furthest. Within 5 years, by 2014, they had reduced overall energy consumption by 50%, and they had made millions of energy dollars in savings. And that inspired us to develop the Energy Efficiency Toolkit for buildings. It's a guide for decision makers internally in corporations, as well as in cities or in administrations, to drive the way forward internally. So without further ado, at this point I will hand over to my colleague Delphine Garin, who will talk you through the Energy Efficiency Toolkit. Delphine?
Thank you very much, Roland. So together with Eddie Van Ino from SDS, I will walk you through the EEB Toolkit, and Eddie will provide illustration for the different steps of the toolkit. So this is the front page of the EEB Toolkit, and you can access it at www.eeb-toolkit.com. It's a free-to-use guide, and it's a guide to help set up and implement programs to save energy in buildings. It is really focused on the business case. It means that it primarily supports your decision-making process to start and implement a program on energy efficiency in buildings for a buildings portfolio. And it targets the decision makers in organizations. It means sustainability, finance, property decision makers. And it covers all types of building portfolio, public or private buildings. So these are the 5 main steps of the EEB toolkit. So vision, planning, implementation, evaluating and measuring, and finally results and feedback. So I'm going to details the different steps of the toolkit, but the journey doesn't need to be linear, actually. The 5 steps described here outline one possible way to improve energy efficiency in your buildings, but the steps are not necessarily needed to be completely rigidly in this order. It's more like a circle, not just a linear. So for each of the 5 main steps, you can access a series of tools and resources, and they include tables, further illustration, links to reports and studies that can be useful for you to implement the steps you're looking at. And also for each substate, you have case studies to find out how companies have implemented the steps you're looking at. And currently on the toolkit, we have case studies. So SGS and Eddie will provide illustration for today's webinar. EDF, Sonai Sierra, Novartis, Skanska, and Infosys. So this is the overall structure of the toolkit. So you can see the subparts for each of the main steps. And actually, I'm going to move to the website. It will be easier for you to follow. So this is the front page. Here you can read more about why energy efficiency in buildings matters. You've got the 5 main steps and the sub-steps. So every time you click on a sub-step, you have the sub-steps here, and the structure for each sub-step is what. So for instance, obtain executive commitment. What does it mean? Then why should you do that step, and how? So how to do the step. And on the right-hand side, you've got the tool set, and you've got the case studies, which illustrate the specific steps you're looking at. So if we look at the vision, the first sub-step is indeed to obtain executive commitment. So here we recommend to get the support of the highest level of executive management, like the CEO of companies or organizations, to start an energy efficiency program. And with this support, you will have the best chances of achieving significant energy savings because your program will gain traction internally. And to obtain executive commitment, you need to articulate the business case with a focus on the hard benefits, the ones you can easily quantify, like reduced operating cost or increased asset value, but also the soft benefits, like better workforce productivity and health. So you have examples of those benefits in the tool set here, making the business case for energy efficiency. Moving on to formulate an energy vision. So basically, you need a clear energy vision statement to start an effective program. This can be a standalone statement, or it can be a part of your organization wider vision on corporate responsibility or sustainability. You have example of a template here in the tool set. And basically, this vision identifies your organization cultures, values, strategy, and future plans. And it aims to establish buy-in and support across the organization. And finally, for this first step on vision, you've got to develop an energy policy. So it is typically a formal statement that outlines your organization intention to manage the energy aspects of your business operations. And it's good practice to have your CEO approve the energy policy, because that would demonstrate executive support for energy management and state your CEO's true commitment to the issue. So the energy policy provides a clear statement of intent, and it provides a framework that allows performance to be judged against an agreed set of targets. And in the toolset, you have an energy policy template. So now I would like to hand over to Eddie to provide illustration for this step on the vision. But first, maybe Eddie, you could introduce your company, SGS?
Yeah, sure. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. SGS is a multinational worldwide inspection and verification and certification company, all over 150 countries with about 85,000 employees. So about the statement, what Delphine already mentioned, you need to start, of course, a vision of your CEO. You have to start with that. And we did that also, of course, but that's not the only thing you need. You need also certain commitments. If I look to our company, our CEO, his statement was that he wanted a CO2 reduction of 20% till 2020, with 2014 as a baseline. And to do that, he said, I want 3 non-negotiable landmark energy saving projects per region. And what is, to us, a non-negotiable energy saving project? That's a project that saves at least 200,000 kilowatt hours per year. But to obtain that, you also need a commitment, of course. And how can you reach that? Well, you can incorporate the best available techniques that are economically achievable, kind of ALARA principle. And to do that, you have to think out of the box. If, for instance, if Henry Ford should have asked to his customers what they wanted, they simply would have said, yeah, we want faster horses. But the car would never have been invented. He thought out of the box, and that's something we have to do too. Because when you create something or you think about a new idea, the industry will follow, technology will follow. If there is a market for something, technology will follow, but the idea or the ideas has to come. So you have to incorporate best available techniques according to your operations and to your business, of course. Another thing is you have to make a reduction plan to reduce as much as possible consumption of materials, harmful emissions, and of course waste. Because waste is mostly incinerated and creates also CO2. So don't forget that. It's not only your CO2 by electricity production or your heating and cooling and whatever, but also your waste is a very important parameter for CO2 emission and a way to reduce it. Therefore, you can, I would propose to follow the Lansing ladder. I don't know if if you are familiar with that. Lansing ladder means that first you have to look to prevention. Can we prevent waste? That's the most important thing. If you are not able to prevent it, then you can reuse it. For instance, you can reuse single print paper to reuse it as a scratch paper, for instance. Reuse your pallets, don't incinerate them, reuse them. And if you can't reuse them, go for recycling. Coffee cups, paper and cardboard, solvents, electronic devices, glass, metal, there are a lot of things that are recyclable. And yeah, if it's not possible, then you have to go for incineration, but try to do that, to contact a company that used the heat of the incineration process to produce energy. And if that's not possible, well, the very last point is landfill, of course, but that's something we have to avoid. Another thing that's very important is not only technical development, but also raising employee awareness. And for that reason, within our company, we created the Spot the Dot campaign with some incentives for the affiliate or the group that has the best idea or has the best saving in CO2 by turning off the lights, by turning off or reducing temperature, reducing spill of waste and all that kind of stuff. Behavior of people is the hardest part of reduction, of CO2 reduction, energy reduction, but it's lasting the longest and is the most important thing at the end. So don't forget that. Also, you have also to create a detailed baseline of energy consumption and CO2 emission. Because you can have a program and say, yeah, we want to save energy, but you have to be detailed in putting up your baseline. And last but not least, don't forget, you cannot change what you don't measure. So first of all, when you start a program, when you start a project, measure first of all the before, to be able to prove that your project was very successful, and you can prove afterwards also the reduction of your consumption of energy. And as last point, communication. Don't forget that. Publish on a regular basis results and the progress against reduction targets, and give incentives for best ideas, best results. Involve your employees in the whole vision and in the whole commitment of the company. It's not a management system only, not at all. It's the base who has to do the work. That's about the first step.
Thank you very much, Eddie. And actually, you have already covered part of the planning step. So let's get back to that.
I can talk I have something for the planning too. Go ahead.
So we are moving to step number 2. It's about planning. This it's a very busy step. We've got 8 steps. So I will go quite quickly. You have all the details in the toolkit itself. So basically, you start with the collection of data, and you need to conduct preliminary analysis. So basically, before you develop your program to save energy, you need to understand the physical characteristic of your buildings and how they use energy. So the toolkit provides a couple of templates to do so. So you can find them in the toolset on the right-hand side. So you have a template to collect your basic building characteristics, like the location, the type of building, equipment, type of use, current energy use from the bills you have. You have a template to collect energy data. So basically, what data you need to collect, like overall energy information, indoor, outdoor energy use and cost. And also, you have a template with the stakeholders that are involved in energy efficiency project data collections. So they can be tenants, owner, energy teams, utilities. So just to make sure you are aware of all the stakeholders that you can look at to collect your energy information. So the second step is establishing benchmark. So basically, this is an analysis of your energy use data, and you compare the overall energy consumption of your buildings with similar size facilities, or what we call reference buildings. And this allows to assess the existing energy performance, and it gives you an indication to know if certain buildings consume more energy than others. Moving on, the establishment of a baseline, and Eddie already mentioned this one. So the energy baseline is used as a reference point for comparison before and after the implementation of energy improvements. So a baseline can be useful to convince your executive management of the potential effectiveness of an energy efficiency project. And basically, you develop your baseline to facilitate the tracking of energy use over time, so that you can compare energy usage with previous years. establish an energy team. So the team would have the role of delivering the energy efficiency program. So very often the team is led by an energy manager, who is the person within the organization who manages and leads on energy strategy and the implementation of the energy efficiency measures. So in that case, I think, Eddie, you are very well placed to talk about this. About the audits, so one major step is to conduct energy audits. And the audit has the purpose of recording the existing energy consumption of your buildings, and the audit quantify cost-effective saving opportunities and report the findings. So the main outcomes of an audit are a list of recommended energy efficiency measures, their associated energy savings potential, and an assessment of whether the energy efficiency measures installation costs are good financially. So very often, energy audits require specialist skills and are often outsourced to energy service companies, energy consultants, or energy engineering firms. Then you develop your energy strategy. So that's basically your energy management plan. It's an evolving document, and it includes a description of how objectives and targets will be accomplished, and it details individual responsibility for meeting targets and a clear methodology for monitoring. So the toolkit includes the elements that should be in your strategy, like the assignment of energy roles and responsibilities across the organization. So you've got also a tool set on the rule of regulation, policies, and incentives that you can include in your energy strategy. Moving on to the development of a communication strategy, that's also something Eddie mentioned. It's very important to communicate across your organization about your energy efficiency measures. And the tool set on the right-hand side includes a couple of recommendations of what you should take into account when you design a behavior change campaign for your employees. And Eddie mentioned the campaign they have with the red dot campaign. And finally, define energy goals. So this is the final step for this planning step. So you define your energy goals. So those goals describe the desired outcomes of your energy efficiency program, and they should provide a clear direction of travel and a way of measuring and communicating progress. So ideally, they should be SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And we have seen that the strongest corporate energy goals are usually long-term, so more than 3 years, to allow time for actions to be implemented at the outputs measured. So, Eddie, could you tell us a little bit more about planning as AGS? You can maybe mention your team, your energy team, your goals, and the audits you are doing in your buildings.
Yeah, sure. Well, our team is quite small. We are with 6 members, and some of them are only working part-time for sustainability. But what I want to mention is maybe some practical issues, how SGS approached the planning. First of all, you have to prioritize your actions to look for low-hanging fruits. I mean, use the 80-20 rule. 80% of low-hanging fruits can be found in 20% of the premises. If you have, like SGS, we have nearly 2,000 premises worldwide. We have large surfaces, small surfaces. Well, 80% of the low-hanging fruit can be found in 20% of the premises. And to know what direction you have to follow and where you have to go to make a separation and to prioritize, you have to use or to look for some useful parameters. And the parameters that we are using is, first of all, the surface of the building, is the yearly consumption, electricity consumption, gas consumption, the status of the building, if it is leased or owned, because if we have about, within our company, organization, we have about 30% of owned buildings and 70% of leased buildings. Of course, if you have to ask for a budget for a project, and I'm talking now of hundreds of thousands of euros, of course it's easier to do that in an owned building than in a leased building, of course. So that's also a parameter you have to think about. Also the activity. Is it a lab activity? Is it operational activity versus offices and warehouses? Because the electricity consumption is totally different when you have an office or when you have an operational activity. And also ask about local weather conditions. Use that as a parameter. For instance, if it's in a region where it's in the winter, if it's still hot or warm, you, for instance, can't use free cooling. Is there a lot of rain or not? Then you can use rainwater for adiabatic cooling. So try to gather as much as possible of these parameters to be able to prioritize. And what are we prioritizing when we have those parameters? Well, we are looking to services larger than 2,000 square meters. There you have the most opportunity to find low-hanging fruits. Owned before leased. And our baseline is all locations with more than 100 kilowatt hour per year per square meter for offices and more than 200 kilowatt hours per square meter per year for labs. All those are prioritized. If they are lower, then of course there is no low-hanging fruit, or they have already a good sustainable project. So those are the parameters that you could also use if you want to prioritize and make up a planning of how to start. Back to you, Delphine.
Thank you very much, Eddie. So I am moving back to the toolkit to talk about step 3, implementation. And for this one, you have 4 sub-steps. And the first one is evaluate energy efficiency measures, EEM. So they are basically the measures you can implement to reduce the energy usage of your buildings. And there is a wide variety of EEMs, from simple measures, like you mentioned, Eddie, with low-hanging fruits, to more complex alternatives, to even deep energy retrofits. So the toolkit provides a list of common EEMs in the toolset, and also an interesting tool, an opportunity. Here you have the opportunity class index, which is basically a tool to assess the potential of EEMs in terms of value. And when I say value, I mean financial impact, energy savings, and return on investments. The complexity, if technical expertise is needed to implement an EEM. And finally, cost, the total cost of implementing an EEM, upfront capital cost, and operational and maintenance cost over time. So you have this tool for different EEMs. Then making the business case. So once you have evaluated your EEMs, you need to secure management approval for your program. So you need to make the business case for the specific measures you have identified. And it's important that the value and benefits of your energy efficiency project is understood and clearly articulated. So you should align your project with what is a current hot topic in your organization, if it's about safety, performance, health, or reliability. And also you need to ensure that you speak the same language as your CFO or whoever is responsible for signing off the project. So you need to present a great finance plan for the potential EEM, and you should have previously identified and secured funding. Moving on to the procurement approach. So the toolkit explains how to establish sustainable procurement practices across organization. So not only looking at the upfront cost, but also the need to consider environmental impact and resource consumption throughout the life cycle of a product. So you can find a tool set here on the right-hand side with the different procurement strategies from life cycle cost, energy performance contracting, etc. And finally, implement the project. So we get to the implementation step where the toolkit provides a specification on how to select vendors and contractors, how you should schedule activities. It includes the measures on installing, testing, and commissioning, as well as training, operation, and maintenance. So, Eddie, may I let you give you examples of the energy efficiency measures you have chosen at SGS, and maybe examples of projects you have carried out?
Sure. Well, first of all, when you have a project, you need money, of course, you need a budget, and before going to your CEO and asking for money, you have to compare and weight the cost versus value. That's the first thing to do before you start a project. You have to ask yourself what is acceptable concerning the ROI, the return on investment. And for SGS, and I think that's a general approach, that 2 to 3 years is an acceptable return on investment period for operational investments. Within SGS, our CEO was prepared to accept even return on investments up to 8 years, depending, of course, on the level of energy saving. But that's also a statement and an agreement that you have to make with your management or with the management, that they accept return on investments longer than 2 to 3 years. Sustainability projects are have mostly a longer ROI than an operational one, but normally they last also longer than a normal machinery or an apparatus. If I give some projects that we are busy in applying or already applied. For instance, I talked before of the parameters, and one of the parameters was the weather conditions. Well, I have installed, for instance, in Europe, here in Belgium, in our data center, a large data center, instead of using day and night, summer and winter, free aircos, because if there is one location in your premise or in your organization where you need 24/7 air conditioning, even in wintertime, even during the night and during the weekends, it's in your data center, because the data center, the computers always produce heat. Well, we took out the heat out of the back of the servers. We used that heat, that air, to warm up the buildings, and we projected free cooling into the servers. That means that we don't need aircos anymore, only in summertime, but not in wintertime. In wintertime, in the Western Hemisphere, well, you have temperatures of, let's say, freezing up to maybe 10, 15 degrees, and that's perfect to cool a data center. Only when it's going up, and that's maybe 4, 5, 6 months, half a year, that it's higher, then you need support of an airco. But at least you can reduce your airco consumption, and that's one of the highest electricity consumers. You can reduce it by 50% just by taking the outside air and filter it. It's for free, really. I can tell you we saved, for one data center, 200,000 kilowatts hour per year just by doing that. Another action is lighting. Certainly within offices, lighting is about between 20 and 30%, sometimes even 35%, part of the electricity consumption. We installed in one of the buildings smart LEDs, not only LEDs, but smart LEDs. And why do I put emphasis on smart? Because the smart is going for another 15 to 20% savings. Smart LEDs are LED lighters, but every fixture has a detector, a light detector and a moving detector. So that means that if it's a sunny day, the light comes in through the windows, then they are fading, the lights are fading automatically. If there is no one in anymore after X minutes, you can program that the light goes out. We can prove that because we are measuring it before and after, as I told before. We are saving now 80% of electricity out of that lighting, if you compare it with the older ones, the older tubing lighting. So that's a very interesting investment. Certainly when you look to the, or you ask to the government, the local government, a lot of governments are giving subsidies for relighting, not relamping, but relighting. Just ask for it. And sometimes your ROI can be reduced up to 4 or 5 years. So it's an interesting thing to do. But if you do a relighting, go certainly for smart LEDs with those detectors. Cooling buildings. Normally you cool your building with a chiller. Everyone in larger affiliates do have a chiller or more chillers somewhere on the parking lot. They are working with compressors. They are huge consumers of energy. When I look in our labs, the buildings where there are labs, 50% is due to electricity is due to cooling purposes. So that's a very high consumer. So we have started up a project by cooling the building with dock water. And another possibility is doing it with rainwater. If you are in a region where you have enough rainwater, by adiabatic cooling combined with free cooling. Again, it's nearly 35–40% reduction of energy. Thermal foil, put thermal foil on single glazed windows. That costs 2 times nothing, and it saves quite a lot of energy. If you can avoid that the sun or the cold comes in, then you don't have to cool or heat your building inside. It's a very cheap solution, very fast. It's a quick win, and it's a good resolution. We also working now with battery packs. We are doing some pilots now all over the world, in India, in Africa, to see what we can do with battery packs. So where we can store energy that we produce by solar cells and use it when energy costs the most during the day. Or in those countries, as I mentioned, India, Africa, where you have a lot of power breakdown, it's also a solution to continue to have a business continuity. Another thing is talking about chillers. You can change your chillers and replace it by free cooling and adiabatic cooling, but your classic chillers, you can do also something with that. Remember that a normal chiller is working with ice water from between 6 and 12 degrees C. We arranged it in some affiliates that we raised the ice water temperature up to 9 degrees, and instead of 612, it's 915, and it's still working without any complaints. But be aware that every degree that you can raise your ice water temperature, you save 5% of energy, electricity energy. So that's already 20% if you can go up for 4 or 5 degrees. And also if you can lower in wintertime your condensation temperature of your chillers by lowering the condenser pressure, 1 degree lower is also 2% saving. And in wintertime, your condensation temperature should always be higher than the ambient, the outside temperature, the environmental temperature. But in wintertime, of course, temperature is lower than in summer. So you can ask your supplier to lower also the pressure, means lower the temperature, means lower your energy consumption. So that's what I call low-hanging fruits. With a very limited cost or even no cost, you can already save quite some energy. That's a few examples of what you can do to save energy.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Edith. Thanks a lot for sharing all your good tips and your successful projects. I'm going back to the toolkit now. In the interest of time, I think I'm going to speak about step 4 and step 5 just now, and I will hand over to you, Eddie, for the illustration of those 2 steps. So step 4 is about evaluating and measuring. So here, basically, let me just close the page. So here it's about you need to track energy performance through outgoing data collection and analysis. So this is what we call measurement and verification, which is the process of quantifying energy consumption before and after the implementation of the energy efficiency measures. And in the tool set, you have something on behavior change and also how to calculate and communicate energy savings. If I move to the final step, step 5, that's about results and feedback. That's the final stage of the toolkit. And it consists of the presentation of the results and outcomes to executive management in order to review progress, approve changes to the energy efficiency program as a whole, and suggest additional energy efficiency measures. So this management review provides a good opportunity to demonstrate the effectiveness of the implemented project, and it's a good way to secure commitment and resources for further energy efficiency improvements. So, Eddie, can I ask you to share your experience at SDS?
Sure. Well, the main statement here is, as I already mentioned before, you cannot change what you don't measure. So that means if you want to launch a project, a large project, first of all, install a monitoring tracking system, because you have to prove for yourself and also to management who agreed with the investment to prove the difference, that your project was successful. And you cannot do that if you don't measure a before and an after. It could certainly, if I look to our cases in laboratories, you could do a relighting project and save, let's say, 20% or even 80%. But if it is in a lab environment, the percentage of lighting consumption is only between 3 and 8%. So if they install or enlarge a lab and they install quite heavy machinery, afterwards you even don't see the difference. Maybe you are consuming more than before, only because you have enlarged your lab and you installed a lot of energy consumers, and you don't see it. You don't see the differences before and after. What about your project? So that's why it's necessary to install monitoring tracking systems and make it, please, a centralized system. Certainly, if you have a lot of affiliates worldwide, make it a centralized system so you can follow it up from your desk at the headquarters. Use the data also as a benchmark between countries or business lines or even cities. This creates an internal contest with positive mindsetting. Communicate also the results of a project, and use it also to prioritize actions you want to execute. It's also useful after implementation of project to prove the effectiveness to the management, because the proof of the pudding, of course, is in the eating. And about collecting energy and emission data, do that on a regular basis, if possible permanent, through online measurement system, or if not possible, at least twice a year, so you can act and react quite fast. If something goes wrong, follow it up as quick as possible. Use also the data results for communication to all stakeholders in a yearly report, to inside and outside stakeholders. Not only outside, but also mostly inside, because it's the inside stakeholders who are the most important, who can make the difference. You can also use it as an internal benchmarking, securing management commitments for further projects that they believe in your projects, and achieve external awards or recognitions like we do for SDS. We have the Dow Jones Sustainable Index, we are #1. We have the Robesco SAM, CDP, EcoVadis. It's also important for your customers to prove that you are the best or one of the best in sustainability. That's the new quality label, sustainability, really. Back to you, Delphine.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eddie, for all this. This is the end of the presentation of the toolkit, but I just wanted to put the EEB toolkit in the perspective of our project on energy efficiency building that we have at the WBCSD. So I will be very quick, but I wanted to give you this example of our work in Jaipur in India. So in Jaipur in India, we focus on our work on awareness together with the Indian Green Building Council. And we are currently collecting case studies from different organizations to show how energy is saved in organizations. So we currently have one case study from the ITC Rajputana Hotel. We'll have another case study from another hotel, another one from the university in Jaipur, from a commercial center, and from an IT park. So the local platform that we have set up in Jaipur is doing many workshops on the topic of energy efficiency to raise awareness of the different stakeholders. And for instance, last month, they organized a workshop with the Public Works Department of the government of Rajasthan. They presented the EEB toolkit, and they even gained interest from the Public Works government to do an audit of the government buildings. So with those case studies, collection, and the organization of workshop, we see that the toolkit can be used to raise awareness in a city and to motivate action to reduce energy use in buildings. So we just wanted to give you this example of our work in Jaipur in India. So this is to conclude this presentation. We are always happy to get feedback on the toolkit. So please feel free to send any comments or suggestions for improvement, or even if you have case studies that you would like to include in the toolkit, we are very happy to have them uploaded. So feel free to send your feedback. You have our email address on this slide, eeb@wbcsd.org. Thank you. Over to you, Aris.
Thank you very much, Delphine and Eddie. Now we will go to the Q&A session. We have a few questions. The first of all is for you, Delphine. The question is, what is the cost of implementing the toolkit in an organization? The question is not about the cost of the methodology, but about the cost of an organization that has to incur in order to implement the different stages of the toolkit, which would include staff, admin costs, and others.
I don't have a number for this. The toolkit is free to use, so it's a good methodology, but I don't think this is not the purpose of the question. I guess it really depends on the measures that want to be implemented, if it's the low-hanging fruits that we mentioned, or if a deep retrofit. I don't know if, Eddie, if you have a number in mind of the cost.
Well, not really a number, but what I can tell you is that the main, or the probability that you are successful in implementing projects is that you have a dedicated team. And we found that also in some countries where we are working, where we are operating, that if you don't have a facility manager for a country, or a facility team or a sustainability team, it doesn't work. It's very hard to find even projects or low-hanging fruits, as I call it. The main thing is that you have to dedicate facility or sustainability that's very similar to each other. It's related to each other. That you define one person as a facility, call it now a facility manager, sustainable manager, someone who is addressable and who is accountable for realizing and finding projects and thinking about projects. Otherwise, it will fade out through the organization, through finance, through HR, through whatever, and you won't have any success. You won't be successful. So first of all, dedicate one or team of persons to look for sustainable items and possibilities. And not a cost, okay, if you have a full-time function for a facility manager, of course, looking for projects is not a full-time job. It's part of. And I think you need really, if you have several buildings, you need a centralized service, or at least a centralized person, dedicated person, who is responsible for all the buildings and all the consumption and invoices concerning building and energy consumption. It's better for the organization, then you have really a very good view on your consumption, because be aware that energy costs a lot of money, and it's a hidden cost, because it comes from everywhere. It's part of your building cost. It's heating, it's cooling, it's electricity, it's waste and whatever. But if you count it all together, it's quite a large amount of money where you can save on. And well, it's best to dedicate it to a team, or at least to a person. That's my opinion about that.
Okay, thank you very much, Eddie and Delphine. The next question is, I think it's for Eddie. You mentioned that baseline is very important. In developing countries, there is hardly any robust data for the building center or capacity to collect it. How can these countries still establish a baseline with such data gaps? Can the requirement to set the baseline itself be a barrier for taking actions in energy efficiency because the needed data cannot be collected?
Well, I doubt that. First of all, they have every month an invoice, at least. So by means of the invoice, you know how much energy you are consuming, because you have to pay it anyway. And on the other hand, that's what I was mentioning, a monitoring system, that's not that costly. A monitoring system, place it at the entrance, the energy entrance, the cable or whatever, your counter or metering, place a metering system in the office and the building, and you don't even have to connect it through internet, because that's more efficient, of course, but that costs more money. But a simple counter, a simple metering system is, well, I'm talking about a few €100 or US dollars, and you can read it manually every month, for instance. But it's not that difficult to collect data. By your invoices that you receive anyway, or even if you don't see invoices, it is included in the total lease contract, for instance, that's also possible. Then you can put a very simple metering system at the entrance of your electricity, your water, your fuel, whatever.
Thank you very much, Eddie. The next question is for Delphine, and the question is, which are the main barriers for implementing the toolkit?
I think it's a bit like what Eddie said, that you need to have someone dedicated to using the toolkit. So if you don't have an energy manager, it could be someone looking after your facility. But I guess you need to have that person who will be able to go through the different steps and prepare the different elements of the energy efficiency program. So then I think it's pretty straightforward, and Eddie provided good examples of simple or not so simple solution, but very smart solution that can be implemented. So if you can have that person who can look after the different stages and prepare the policy, the vision, get the executive commitment, I think it's key to have executive commitment to the program. That's how you will get support internally, and you will get traction internally to implement programs. And also, if you can get your employees engaged in the implementation program, that would be very good. Eddie mentioned their behavior change campaign that they've had internally, so that's a good element to have. So I think that's what I would say, that yeah, you need to have that person who will take care of the program internally. And then executive commitment.
Okay, thank you, Delphine. The next question is again for you. It's about the toolkit. How can the toolkit be used to monitor and track the process of a project involving the renovation of several commercial buildings in terms of improving energy efficiency?
I think the toolkit provides some templates that can be used for that purpose, but as such, it doesn't have a tool that can be used for that. But it provides some template that you can use in your work.
Thank you. Eddie, the next question I think is for you. Changing behavior is not easy. What incentives do you offer to employees / building users to implement efficiency measures?
Well, the incentives doesn't have to be that expensive, you know. You can go for a meal voucher. You can go for the group, for instance, that has achieved the best savings. Go for a meal for the whole group, or going a bowling voucher, something like that. Even just to strengthen the connection between that group and to make it even stronger. It's kind of vouchers, not a lot of money. It's just the appreciation that's important. That hey, we are the best, we are better than you, and the other says what? Next month we will be better than you. You create a kind of positive competition between groups, between departments, between buildings, between countries or even cities. And it's small gifts. We have, for instance, our how should I say, the logo is a polar bear. We call it the polar bear, less with an umlaut. That's also a Norwegian name. But less, of course, means also, more with less. So we do more with less with our polar bear. Well, we give, for instance, polar bears for the kids. Small gifts. It doesn't have to be that expensive. But
Thank you,
if you do that, I try try to give something to the group, not to one person, but to the group who achieved the savings, so they can do something again together and discuss it, and it strengthened the commitment within the group.
Okay, thank you, Eddie. And now it's our last question, because we already have the webinar more than an hour. It's for you, Eddie, and the question is, which is the methodology they use for estimating CO2 emissions?
Well, that's a good question. We do that in several ways. We have, first of all, we divide it in electricity, and that's something we do country by country, because not every country has the same CO2 emission per kilowatt hour. For instance, if you go to France, if we stay in Europe, if you go to France, where 80% of the electricity production is done by nuclear power, of course the CO2 emission is much lower than, for instance, Germany, when they have skipped and closed nearly all their nuclear plants and go for gas and even coal-fired energy plants. The CO2 is higher per kilowatt hour in Germany than in France. So we have for every country, and you can find that through internet, you know, a correction factor per country to calculate the CO2 per kilowatt hour electricity per country. But the CO2 is not only produced by electricity, it's also by fuel, by transportation. A lot of companies do have a car fleet to go to customers, to visit customers, whatever. It's also a CO2 producing, and that's also something we take in consideration. The non-transport fuel for heating, gas oil, gasoline, and also the traveling, plane, train, and so on, traveling around the world. Those are the four CO2 emitters that we count together. And just to tell you about SGS, we have in 2015, to be exactly, 199,629 tons of CO2 emitted, so 200,000 tons, and 30% was due to electricity, 42% due to transportation, 14% to non-transportation, heating, and 14% for traveling, planes and trains and so on. And another parameter is the CO2 emissions per FTE. And the third one, the CO2 emission per revenue. Because, as I told you before, you can launch a project, a relighting project, but in the meantime, in the building they are installing a new lab or a new operation device, which is consuming a lot of energy. At the end, maybe you will consume more on your main counter, your main meter, than before. So what's the effect of your relighting? That's why you have to count also your CO2 emission per FTE, because if they enlarge a lab, they need more employees, and they will have at least more revenue, I hope. So also count it per FTE and per revenue and per square meter, because that was one of the parameters, or is one of the parameters we are using to define or to prioritize actions. As I told you, more than 100 kilowatt hours per square meter for offices and more than 200 for operational buildings. That's where we are focusing on.
Thank you, Eddie. Now we're at the end of our webinar. I would like to thank our panelists, Roland, Delphine, and Eddie, and also I would like to thank our attendees, and especially those ones who sent us their questions. So from Copenhagen, have a nice day or afternoon, and we hope to see you in a future webinar. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.